Hello and welcome to Behind the Stripes webcast, Game Week edition, Dave, although I think most of our discussion probably will be about things other than Illinois. I'm sports editor Joe Walljasper, along with Tribune football beat writer Dave Matter. Dave, obviously the topic of the last week has been Derrick Washington. Suspended on Thursday, then news comes out that he has been accused of sexual assault. Charges come out Monday. So he's charged with felony sexual assault, suspended indefinitely until that gets cleared up. So he may or may not ever come back. Just your thoughts on how the university and Gary Pinkel dealt with it.
Well, I think a big piece of the puzzle was discovered or revealed last night when we found out, I should say Monday night, we found out that the restraining order that kind of started all of this was never actually delivered to Washington. Which isn't that uncommon for the way these things work. But I think that sort of takes Missouri off the hook for at least knowing about this to the extent that it is for a long period of time. And I think, the conspiracy theories that they were trying to cover this up, I think that kind of goes away with the fact that it never was delivered to Washington in the first place. I think they probably had a faint knowledge of an incident, but didn't know about it to the scope of what we all know about it now, at least the allegations. So, they tried to get out in front of it, it seems, by suspending him on Thursday before anyone in the public knew about anything at all. And now it's kind of out of Missouri's hands altogether because of the felony charge. It goes, their policy in the athletic department is that you're suspended indefinitely with the felony charge. So now it's up to the courts to decide. The big question is going to be is, if he should plead this down to a lesser charge of misdemeanor, what does Gary Pinkel do as far as Washington's future with the program? And that's where I think we're a long way away from getting to that point, but that could be out there eventually.
Well, I think he's pleading innocent, and so his arraignment isn't until September 23rd. He's pleading, so this thing isn't going to be resolved probably before this season's over. I guess I took a little bit different stance in that I think they had more than a faint idea of what he was accused of. After athletes are arrested, especially prominent athletes, the police let Missouri people know what they have at least been accused of. So I think that much they knew from the get-go. At that point, they're not able to obviously to talk to the alleged victim. They can talk to Derrick. You're probably going to get a different story from him than from her, especially in a case like this, which is a he said, she said situation. So I think probably from their point of view, they were thinking it would be nice if the prosecutor would decide whether this is prosecutable crime or not, then we don't have to, throw the kid under the bus if it doesn't rise to that criteria. But then, as it turned out, it's basically 2 months sitting in the prosecutor's office, and so their hand kind of basically got forced. But yeah, I guess I'm not totally comfortable with the way they handled it, but I think what they had to go on. I think it was probably a little bit sketchy as far as, and even now, he could be innocent, even knowing what we know now. All we know basically still is her side of the story, and he's going to plead innocent. So at some point we will get to hear his side of the story. But like I said, I don't know that I certainly don't think you're going to see him in a uniform this year, and then it's debatable whether you ever will. Just the impact of not only that, but now trying to think since we last spoke, I guess they've had one DWI since our last webcast, so that's about their average for the summer. The impact of the guys are going to be missing on Saturday. There's going to be Derrick Washington's missing, Will Ebner is missing, Bo Brinkley's missing. He might have been missing with an injury anyway. Who am I leaving out?
That's it as far as the guys who have gotten in trouble. And I don't know in this game if it makes a huge difference. I think Illinois is pretty overmatched in this game. And Ebner, he probably wasn't going to start if he was healthy. Luke Lambert has been ahead of him on the depth chart. It'll be interesting to see what happens to Missouri's running game. I think a couple of weeks ago, probably a week ago at this time, we thought it could be a potential strength of this team, just the way that Washington had played, the way the offensive line had played. And it's never going to be something that this offense relies on heavily, but it did look to be improved from a year ago. Now, I'm not sure we can be that confident in that statement, although I think Kendall Lawrence and Devin Moore can do a decent job. But Washington did look that good to where now I think there's some uncertainty on if they can have an an effective running game. So we'll find out, some on Saturday, but again, Illinois is not very good, so I think we won't know the scope of his impact not being out there for a while.
You would say that Illinois is the best of the non-conference opponents, or no?
I'm not sure. I mean, they are really ravaged by injuries and some personnel issues, and 3 of their 4 starters in the secondary could be guys who started off preseason camp on offense. And, as much heat as Missouri's secondary has taken over the years, this group doesn't even have backups that can play. They've got wide receivers and running backs playing corner. So I think Blaine Gabbert could have a really big day, and the difference in Missouri's tailback situation might not even be a factor. So I don't know. This is a pretty rough Illinois team. I think they might be better than, say, San Diego State, but Missouri always seems to get up for this game. They always have one non-conference game that maybe they don't play their best at. Maybe that game against San Diego State is a little more competitive here in a couple weeks.
Kind of leading into the next question, but what do you think Missouri, what are their fears basically against Illinois? They're obviously, Illinois is a team that has 2 new coordinators, so there's a certain amount of unknown with that.
Yeah, I think the one thing Illinois might have is the element of surprise. Paul Petrino is their new offensive coordinator. He is the brother of Bobby Petrino, the coach at Arkansas. They coached together at Louisville for a long time. That brief year with the Atlanta Falcons in the last couple of years down in Arkansas. So Missouri doesn't expect necessarily a carbon copy of Arkansas's offense because, as Dave Steckel, Missouri's defensive coordinator, said yesterday, they do understand that Paul Petrino is his own man. He's not going to just throw out his brother's offense, and he has different personnel too. But they can kind of expect to see something similar to what Arkansas runs, and that's kind of a not really a spread offense. It's more of a multiple pro-style type offense. So that they kind of know what to expect there. Defensively, Vic Koenig is the D coordinator. He was at Kansas State a year ago. Blaine Gabbert lit up that secondary. I don't know if they can really rely too much on that 1 year, but he was at Clemson for a long time too. So they'll have the element of surprise a little bit. They've got a quarterback who's granted is a redshirt freshman, and Nathan Shieldhouse will be making his first college game appearance. But he's a mobile guy who can run around and could cause problems for defenses. I think if Illinois has anything going for it in this game, it's they had a pretty good running game a year ago. It was number 2 in the Big Ten. Their running back LeSure led the Big Ten in yards per carry. Missouri, I don't think we're quite sold yet on their front 7 against the run. Maybe they can control the clock, not expose Shieldhouse too much to Missouri's defense and try to control things with the running game. I don't know. I think it's a tall order because I just don't think this Illinois team is very good.
The wild card, I think, is Shieldhouse too. If he goes Brad Smith on him, then obviously all bets are off.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think you kind of know what you're getting with the rest of those guys. Missouri's seen those other players before.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the last year for this Illinois series in St. Louis. Just your thoughts on the ending of that series, and we can get into maybe a little bit of non-conference scheduling as a whole, because that's a topic that's been brought up earlier this week.
Sure. I think it's kind of a shame because it's a good regional rivalry. It's a good setup in St. Louis. It's not always been the most competitive game, but there have been some really entertaining ones, some shootouts in years past. So I think it's kind of a shame that they're getting away from it. I think Missouri would probably like to keep it going. It sounds more like, and I know for a fact it's more of Illinois. They want to play 7 home games. That doesn't really fit in. Playing a neutral site game in St. Louis doesn't really fit into their agenda. So you've got 2 different programs with 2 different scheduling agendas at this point. Both of them also, their conference schedules are going to change a lot here in the next couple years with all the conference realignment stuff. So I think that is a factor too. Gary Pinkel talked yesterday that he would like to, restart this rivalry either in St. Louis or on the 2 campuses at some point. I don't know if he's going to be around a lot longer to see this happen in 10 years or so. But it's rare though to see these non-conference sort of regional rivalries that play every year survive more than a few times a decade, kind of like this Missouri-Illinois one. I mean, the exception to the rules are the Florida States, the Iowa State. You don't get these every year anymore, just because, like I said, everyone's agenda is so different that it's hard to come to agreement on these things sometimes.
The other side of it is, I think, coaches at BCS conferences have figured out there's no great reward for Illinois playing Missouri. there's no great reward for anybody to play a good opponent, basically, unless you're from a non-BCS conference and you want to win that would propel you high enough to where if you have an undefeated season, you make the championship game. Other than that, so there's a reason Boise State's playing Virginia Tech.
Right.
But there really isn't enough of a reward for any of these teams other than just manliness or pleasing your fans. I mean, you can play a terrible schedule if you're in a BCS conference and you never get penalized for it.
Right. And the neutral site game is lucrative for Missouri. They're going to make more on this game than they would just a home game, and that wouldn't happen if they were going to St. Louis to play, Arkansas State or Louisiana Lafayette. They have to have somebody that brings in some fans and some name recognition there. And they're going to trade out this game for a series with Arizona State and Indiana, and that just doesn't quite carry the same excitement level as playing in Illinois, even when Illinois is down. So. Like I said, it's kind of a shame, but it's unrealistic to keep something like this going in today's game.
I guess I at least would be happy that if they play Arizona State and Indiana. I think the concern for Missouri fans probably is when you move to an 8-game, or rather a 9-game conference schedule, that you're just not going to play any BCS conference opponents. And we talked to Gary Pinkel about that, and he was very non-committal, which makes me think that if he had his way, he would drop that once the schedule changes.
Right, because he mentioned that they'll be picking up another BCS conference opponent automatically, and it'll be either Texas or Oklahoma, the way you look at it.
Okay, well that wraps up the last preseason webcast. Join us next week when we will discuss the Illinois game. That was my least awkward ending.
Yeah, you're good.